Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a Thursday. That means it's weekly export sales day. I'm Marlon Bowling with you, your tour guide to the ag commodities. And let's take a look at the weekly export sales numbers and see what they had this past week. Were they good or bad? Well, let's take a look. Okay, on the corn, we had total sales this past week that came out to be 1.52 million tons that were sold. And we had soybeans at 1.14 million. So both of them back over a million. We had soybean meal, 262,600 tons this time. Soy oil, 14,700 tons. And the wheat, well, 161,200 tons. Now we also had some numbers for the grain sorghum, the cotton, and the rice. On grain sorghum, you know how in recent weeks, quite a few of those weeks, we had net reductions. Well, not this week. We actually sold 88,100 tons of sorghum. Interesting, where it was almost all for Spain. Okay. Upland cotton, they jumped up quite a bit here this week, 325,600 running bales. And you had rice coming in at 10,100 tons. That was down 38% from what we had a week ago at this time. Well, I want to bring in Brian Hoops of Midwest Market Solutions so we can chat about everything for a little bit. Well, yesterday we had all kinds of turmoil in the markets, choppy action in the corn. It was on both sides of unchanged. Early gains all evaporated for the most part. Wheat tried to hang in there. And then, of course, we had the interest rate announcement by the Fed yesterday. What is it that you see driving the market today as we kind of walk through these overnight sales numbers here while you're talking? So what do you see driving it? Are these export numbers going to be a factor?
Hey, good morning, Marlon. With so many other things to talk about, the export numbers really are not much of an influence on the market today. Maybe the lack of a private export sale is even more significant from the standpoint that next week's sales will probably be very slow. There has been some rumors that China is looking for U.S. soybeans once again, but we haven't seen any confirmation of that. But you look at the export numbers, what stands out is old crop soybeans and old crop wheat. Already, we've got enough on the books to meet the USDA forecast. Now, there's only about 4 weeks of the export season left, so that's not that significant. But for soybeans, we've got several months left, and that means the USDA really needs to increase their export profile in this month's supply and demand report. They need to do the same thing for corn. Even though our numbers weren't really all that outstanding, it was well above the 10 million bushels or so that is needed to meet the USDA forecast. So we do expect the USDA to tighten balance sheets this month for the old crop categories for both corn and soybeans. And then we also will get a look at new crop balance sheets. And we expect those to be somewhat friendly as well, although I doubt the USDA pulls back any yield potential because of the delayed planting. So that's what the market is, I think, really focused on, is the planting pace that we're seeing. Now, there's pockets of the country that are planting corn and soybeans, but it's falling further and further behind the national average. And so we expect that Monday's report should be very friendly from that standpoint, that we're well behind the normal pace, and that's going to be a concern for the trade. And I think with the crude oil prices surging here, we'll be talking about inflationary strength as well for these grain markets.
Well, you mentioned the crude oil. Let's take a look at what that crude oil market is doing. Again, we're higher today. Look at these numbers. These are phenomenal prices. We have June, West Texas crude at $110.78 per barrel, $110.78 per barrel. That's up $2.97 right now, and it had been as high as $111.37. Yikes. It should be maybe a little supportive, though, to soy oil and also to the corn. Let's take a look at the corn market in the overnight trade. So when we wrapped up the Globex, we had that July contract. We'll go with that since May is about done. July was up 4 cents at $7.99. It got up to $8.02. Couldn't quite close above $8 in the overnight trade. The December contract, 3 higher at $7.39.25. Now let's go to the soybean trade with our quotes provided by Bar Chart. We had July closing 13 higher at $16.54 overnight, and your November new crop was 8 higher. And it was at $14.94.5. Now, moving on to our wheat trade. In Chicago, we had that July contract 24 higher at $11.01. In Kansas City, you had the July trading 28 higher at $11.51.25. Big move there. And in Minneapolis wheat, you had the July contract 21 higher at 11.98.5. Now, Brian, we'll come back in a moment, and I want to have you help analyze the beef and pork export numbers that came out. We'll talk about that coming up next. Well, as I mentioned, we had beef and pork export sales numbers that came out just a few minutes ago. Let's take a look at what we had for sales last week. Well, we had the beef coming in with a grand total of 14,700 tons. Now, there was 100 tons of that total that was earmarked for 2023. That was all for Japan. The rest of it, of course, was for this calendar marketing year, and that was up 28% from what we had last week. So it was an improvement. And Japan was the biggest buyer of 4,100 tons. Notably, we had China in there buying 1,600 tons of U.S. beef last week. Now we jump over to the pork side, and over on the pork, we had net sales of 23,800 tons. That was down 24% from what we had the week before. And we interestingly had the biggest buyer being Mexico at 11,300 tons. South Korea picked up 3,700 tons. Those are the top buyers. Japan got 3,400. And China was not in the mix again. They were absent, didn't buy any pork at all. That makes quite a few of the last several weeks where they have been absent, Brian. Is that getting to be a bigger concern because we keep hearing about all the shutdowns in China right now?
Yeah, I think it's to be expected because of what's happening over in China with all the shutdowns. They're just not buying a lot of beef or pork, in fact, hardly anything. You know, the sales that we saw this morning are up from a week ago, but hardly inspiring for the trade. You know, the cattle market, I think, is disappointed this week after early rally as the cash trade's coming in no better than steady. We still have Kansas to trade, so there's still hope that we could see higher money there, and that would give the futures market a leg higher again. But yeah, certainly disappointed that we can't see better cash trade when the show list numbers are down. And, you know, the hog market really needs some support in here. We're kind of been in a free fall till yesterday when we traded an inside consolidation type day, although it was a $3 higher move. You know, these sales numbers that we saw are really uninspiring to change the trend of that hog market or to really give us a leg up in the cattle. So we're still looking at, you know, direction for this cattle market. Demand and cash trade is really going to be what is influencing us. Packer margins are slipping a little bit, so they're trying to cut down their kills and prop up those margins, which won't help us out, you know, in the weeks going forward for cash needs.
Nearby live cattle were weaker on the close yesterday. The June was down $0.50. August was down 25 cents. Deferreds were a little bit higher. On the feeder cattle market yesterday, you had the August contract down 7 cents. The deferreds were over 30 cents higher, though. Oh, I thought that was kind of interesting. Lean hogs, you had that June contract up $2.90 and July up $3.20 on the close yesterday. So that's a look at how we are set up for today. Thanks, Brian, for the help. Brian Hoops, Midwest Market Solutions. Janet, back to you.